Fantastic. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Pushing the Limits. Today, I have a superstar for you. I have combed the world to find yet another amazing doctor who is going to share some of his insights today. I have Dr. William Seeds. Welcome to the show, Dr. Seeds. Fantastic to have you.
I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Oh, it's really fabulous. I've been doing a little bit of study on your work, and I came to hear about you through our mutual friend, Dr. Elizabeth Youth from the Boulder Longevity Institute. And I know that she's part of your SSRP group and has been learning lots from you and your colleagues. And so I was like, right, I need to learn from you too. So I've been lucky enough to get some time with you today to share about, well, we're going to get into hopefully peptides and cellular health. But before we do that, Dr. Seeds, can you just give me a little bit of background on yourself and how did you end up where you are now, as opposed to, you know, just being an orthopedic surgeon?
Well, so that's a really good question, because it has a lot to do with why my journey hasn't even begun yet. And this may make sense, and it may resonate even with you and with your personal story with your mother and what you've done to help her in her life. So my journey started back around when I was, I want to say close to 16 years of age, where I was an athlete. I was a young kid that really didn't have much of a brain to understand the real world. I was just focused on sports, and my dad was a very sports-oriented father, and I trained with him, and we were like best friends. And unfortunately, I lost him in front of me. He died in front of me on the track, and I couldn't do anything to save him.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it had such an effect on me that, you know, my life changed, and I could do nothing. And here was somebody that I thought was in the best health of their life, you know, that somebody who was working out, doing everything right back 40 years ago. And so I ended up with lots of questions in my mind, lots of anger. You know, I had no idea how to deal with grief, and all of a sudden I was the oldest in the family, and I had to take charge. So my life changed drastically, but I was up for it. I was like, hey, you know, my dad prepared me to be this person. Let's go. And from that point moving on, I wanted to learn more about what I could that maybe other people didn't know or other people understood. And that was this word biochemistry and molecular biology, things that had an influence on why do things happen. I mean, that just popped into my head, really. And I found a book out there that was written by a couple biochemists, and it was a comprehensive clinical practices life extension book that was written by Drew Pearson and his wife, two biochemists. And it was about 800 pages of real chemistry and just an explanation, starting to be an explanation of, you know, why do things happen? And they were at the forefront of really understanding the beginnings, I think, of why we need to look at we need to look for answers, and this is where it starts, basically. So they were giving me a blueprint, basically. And the best part of this book is it had a chapter on how to do research. And so this is the crazy part. So I ended up getting this book. I read it, and I had no idea what it said in it. I read it like intently with notes, and I read it so well that no one could read it that well. And I had no idea what I was reading. And so then I'm off ready to go to college, take this book with me. And I actually went to college, and I was a business major. I was a finance major in college, but I spent all my time in college. I spent all my time rereading this book and using the library to, as they taught me how to research. And I just researched the things that I thought were important related to this book, and also related to training and all these things I did. And it was like, I had this incredible, I spent so much time on it. I mean, that's what I did in school. I never went to my business classes. I would take the tests and show up, but all I did was go. And this book was my Bible.
Yep.
And I built this incredible research around this book. And it started to be where, like, my friends in school, I would help them with their biochemistry. I help them with their biology, and I'm this business guy. and it was just, I just really wasn't thinking about it, because it was a passion I had. It was something that was, it had nothing to do with school, but I had the resources because I was in college. I had everything I needed. So it got to be to this point where I was like, I'm graduating with a business degree, and I'm like, what am I doing? I mean, I see a different path. And so, and I'm sorry this is taking so long.
No, this is gold. This is gold.
So,
this is what got you started.
So I went to my department. I went to the department chair of who was in charge of going to medical school. And I asked them, I said, hey, look, I'm graduating in business school, but I think I want to go to medical school. And I think I could take this test to get in, and can I do that? And this guy looks at me and laughs and just says, no, you can't do that. You need to go, you need to just take your business degree, and you do your, go that route. You just can't do that. And I looked at this guy, and I was, that's one thing with me, is if you tell me I can't do it, that means it's going to be done. It's like, I really should thank all the people who always tell me you can't, or that will never happen, because
Amen.
that's right. That's the wrong thing to say to me. It's like, oh, here we go again. So I really got pissed, and I ended up calling down at another university that had a medical school, and I asked if I could get an interview with someone to help me. So it was actually interesting, because it was the first time I had to get a coat and tie and, show up for an interview, which I thought was important to look good. And I went down, and they gave me an interview with somebody, and I go in this room, and this person's like sitting there smiling. And I said, look, I'm a business major. I've got an interest in I think, medicine, and I've just done a lot of my own stuff. And all I want to know is, how do I take the test to get in so I can just come to medical school? And they laughed, and they said, no, you can't do it that way. But what you could do is take these courses this summer. If you really want to do this is what you have to do. So they gave me a list of classes to take, and said, you got to do really well on them. And then if you take these, then we would consider that being prepared to take this test. So basically, it was like an accelerated chemistry degree that I was going to do in a summer.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, so I get to go learn stuff I already know, and I could just kind of test out what I really know. I thought, wow, that would be cool. So I was like, okay. So I went back to summer school, I took general chem and organic chem, all this stuff together, and biology. And I mean, it was crazy actually for the summer. But anyways, I loved it. It went well. It correlated so much with some things I did, but I just knew so much more.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was like, okay, took my test, did really well on my test. And then this school, I really liked the school people that talked to me there. And I applied to this school, what was back then called early admission. So I had only applied to one medical school, and they tell you early. So it's like a really fast way of getting into a school. Well, I got it. I got a interview to this school, and went down for my interview. I sit down, and in the room comes that person that originally talked to me when I came down there.
Love
This is a true story. And this person is smiling, looking at me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the person I talked to a year ago.
When I told
And
you you couldn't.
no. This is
Oh,
the
not that
person.
one.
This is the person that gave me the roadmap of what I needed to do.
Oh, right. Gotcha.
Who said I could do it. This is what you need to do. And they, because they wrote it out for me very nicely on a piece of paper. Well, I pulled out of my coat pocket that piece of paper with my checklist of, okay, this done, this done, this done. And I said, look, I put this was what I looked at every day. And, I looked at that and don't take this wrong, but it was like, I looked at this and I also had a picture of this other guy that I flipped off every day because he really pissed me off. I made it into my own little battle. Basically.
Yep.
And so she looks at me and she just goes, and we had an interview and so forth. And she goes, will you come to my medical school? And I go, your medical school? And she goes, well, I'm the dean of the medical school. I was like, what the heck? This is amazing. So I got in and then I went back. So I got early admission, got accepted. And in my college, I was the only one accepted early admission to medical school. So I went to this guy that told me I couldn't. And I had to set up a time to meet with him. And I came in, I said, do you remember me? And he's like shaking his head. And I go, I'm the guy who got into I'm in your program that you don't know about that got in early admission to this medical school. And he's like, yes, of course. You're one of our best. Great to see you. That was fantastic. I've been promoting you I've been talking about you. I said, you don't know who I am. I go, I'm the guy you told who couldn't go to medical school. I'm the guy who had that business degree. And he just is like, he turned like white. I can remember this vividly now. Right. And so that's where it began. And all I said to him is I go, you know what? I go, for me, that worked telling me no, but I want to tell you something, that this can be done and people can approach this from any angle. Doesn't matter where you come from. I go, it's all about passion. It's all about what people want. And you denied that. And so hopefully maybe this will help you, but thank you for what you did for me, because you really pissed me off, And so that was the beginning. And that's, so believe it or not, that never ended for me. I kept, even in med school. So at the beginning, I was in an MD, PhD type of thing, and I didn't end up finishing that because that to me wasn't where I wanted to go. But I kept my own, I was in this, I hate to say it, but I've always been in my own mode of learning while trying to keep up with everything else.
Yes, trying to tick the boxes, but
check the boxes, because med school's like that too. And I just kept pushing my agenda, and I never have stopped. Wow. And it gave me this incredible repertoire of information accessible to myself that I just built on what I thought was important, and based on some really brilliant people to start with. And it turned into a monster. And I haven't really realized what I have, still don't. But it gave me these great opportunities to parlay. So I went into medical school. I saw a lot of things I didn't like that didn't make any sense to me, and I'd argue and get in trouble. And I just decided I better just be quiet so I can get through and get to another point someday where maybe what relevancy I had in my mind could be helpful, because I really saw the importance of the cell. I saw the importance of pathways. I saw the importance of knowing why something happens. Well, then how do we use that to treat? That never happened in medical school. That does not happen. We go into medical school thinking that's what we're going to learn. That's not the way it goes. It's a different agenda. And even though it's good. I mean, it's a way, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, I think it could be done so much better. But going forward, so I became an orthopedic surgeon. I got into orthopedics because that was a way of repair and recovery, and had a lot to do with training and all things I was interested in. But I also had an avenue there of where I could parlay some ideas and thoughts and transition some things into a lot of things I knew about nutrition and the cell. I mean, it always came back to knowing what keeps a cell healthy, and it just got me so far. And then it built my orthopedic career, and I could do things and help people in different ways that gave me a position where people sought me out, because I could actually do things to accelerate repair. I could do things to get people back, an athlete back professionally, where they didn't have to be worried about re-injury like you typically do once you're injured. It's all about minimizing scar tissue and minimizing fibrosis and actually getting more anatomical healing if you operate or so forth. But long story short, that's where it all started.
Yep.
And then it just
it's huge. No,
it blew up from there, and it hasn't stopped. And in fact, I kind of say I'm just getting started, because now I have had, luckily I had some people about 8-9 years ago who convinced me to come teach for them and start giving people some understanding of what I do. And I had no idea the impact that would have on, I didn't know how much people really wanted to go back and relearn. And, a lot of stuff I discuss is very complicated, but it isn't if you go over it and over it, over it, and it's another language, but it makes sense once you get it. And it's not that I'm smart. It's not that I've just worked very hard to gain that knowledge, and I just have it. So, and I know how to keep building it. And that's all it is. I just have a leg up on, I've been doing it for a while, and I know how to keep looking and keep searching, because it'll never stop.
No, and especially not this area.
Excuse me?
Especially not in this area, because it's just growing and blowing up around the world, the whole peptides and cellular health. And
it will never stop, because we can't know enough.
Yep.
And that's the beautiful thing. It's like, it just keeps you so hungry. And so there's not a day I can't wait. I can't wait to start, like when I get up early and I know I got to do my workout, but in the middle, I'm going to look up this article, and then I'm going to, the beauty of it is that I have no path when I do, like I give myself a certain amount of the day in the morning where I can go anywhere I want. I don't have a pattern. I just let my brain go.
Wow.
And that's actually the funnest, because you know how you go down a rabbit hole and it just keeps you you go, well, wait, I need to go down here because that's interesting. And you end up somewhere else, like, how the heck did I get here? But then that ends up parlaying into something like, gosh, I've been working on this patient for a while, and why didn't I see this? How could I miss this? And it's the most beautiful experience. And I feel so privileged that I get to, it's almost like I got somebody helping me and guiding me, yet I know it's just,
wow.
I don't know.
Knows?
Who knows? It's crazy. It's almost like when I have something that comes into my head, it ends up turning out to be so important in helping something else, or being just by not having an agenda sometimes.
Yeah.
So gosh, I've really talked so much here about just myself, but
no, but this is gold, Dr. Seeds, because it helps me understand you and your work now, because I understand your background, and I just resonate so much with all of that, being told you can't do it. So, okay, I'll find a way around it. And with sheer guts and determination and fight, that you are willing to go that. And I also, the whole, like with the medical school and the way the medical system even is set up, knowing that you have to go and be learn certain things, and even when you don't agree with everything, you learn it all. But now that you are an expert and at the top of your game, now you get the freedom to go and hang on a minute, guys, now I can bring in all this other things without being shot down because you're a junior who had to go through those ranks, so to speak. Now you can bring all that creative thinking that you've really brought to this space and been able to pull it all together to actually educate now other, because you educate a lot of physicians and healthcare professionals in this area that we're going to dive into shortly. And I just think this is really, you know, like for me, I want to get the information that you have around the peptides, but it's also for me really exciting to understand the person behind the story and the what drives you to be and who, you know, you've become, which is just fantastic. And you were an athlete and you've worked with many athletes as well along the way, haven't you? And this, because I know with like Dr. Youth too, from orthopedic, you know, also in the orthopedic realm, being frustrated with what was on offer, which was, you know, drugs and surgeries basically. And you guys are now working in completely different ways. And I've been like, wow. So a mechanical injury doesn't just have to be fixed with surgery, which is our sort of normal way of thinking. So that may be a good place to dive off into this new world of peptides. In fact, probably we need to define what the heck are peptides and what is it that you do now in that space?
Sure. So peptides were just a way for me to just start introducing a concept to physicians and other healthcare providers of how the cells communicate information, how certain important things that happen in maintaining cellular health is actually manipulated by signaling agents. And peptides are basically like signaling agents that are amino acids that are connected by peptide bonds. And they have and they can be linear, they can be helical, they can be spiral, they can be all different kinds of conformations, and that will influence the strength of the peptide, the half-life of the peptide, the penetration. And these peptides, you can actually think of them, it's kind of an overall, it's saying a peptide is basically it's a little smaller than a protein. But then there's something called a polypeptide, which can be as big as a protein. It's semantics, but basically they're signaling agents that in the body that they could be also called enzymes. They could be called hormones. They could be called receptors. They could be called ligands, which are things that attach to a receptor. So they have lots of different names depending on where they are and how they're made. So that gives you a tremendous amount of leeway when you're talking about cellular metabolism and cellular health. It's a great starting point to get people into that world of thinking about the cell. And because, for instance, insulin is one of the first major peptides discovered that made such a significant difference in health, in keeping people alive and healthy. And, you know, Nobel Peace Prizes were won over this. And that was back in the 1920s when we first realized insulin was there. And so people don't even realize that that's a peptide. So peptides have been around, and some of the greatest science in the world has started with that. And that's where this is so fascinating, is the amount of research on peptides is phenomenal.
It's exploding.
We can't even, you can't quantify it. It's just beyond, but it's so it's really just a starting point in a conversation about talking about peptides, and then, you know, what are their how do you bring their relevance into cell health, and how do you get people kind of into that into your how do you make something very that can be complicated just because there's so much to it, but it really isn't complicated if you make it easy for people to understand, and you give them some little building blocks of understanding, and then you can build out that understanding of the cell, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how I teach. I because you want to make it, it's one of those things, like, don't ever, if anybody tells you something is too complicated, if anybody tells you that this is, you have to have a PhD to understand it, right away, you should call bullshit, because it means you just can't teach it well. And everybody, just because a title means nothing to me. A title means absolutely nothing. Just means you put some work in, but does it mean anything? No, we all have the same capability of understanding. And so our job is to educate people of really what they have out there, and not to keep them thinking they can't learn this, because you are the empowered person. You are the one who can make decisions and make them correct. You just have to have, you need a little bit more information to make better decisions. And you want to be able to find those people that can help you make those decisions. And you want to be able to ask questions. You want to be able to participate, because that's how it works.
This is where I see like a complete paradigm shift happening, where we're able to now, because of the internet and the technologies and the access through things like podcasts and PubMed and things like that, that I can go and access, I can do my own research. I can become an expert in one particular area quite quickly. The story with my mum, and as my audience knows, I became pretty, adept at researching and finding out. I had no medical background, but once you understand the concepts of learning and researching, then the power is in your hands to go out there and actually find the experts, find the studies, find whatever it is that you're looking for. And that empowers the person. And I think there's a paradigm shift happening where people are becoming more empowered to actually go and learn. Like I do not have a doctorate. I'm not an MD. But I want to learn about peptides, because peptides for me they seem like just magic. They seem to me like just magical things that can do so many things in so many areas and help with so many diseases. Why wouldn't I not want to learn about this just as a layperson? Why would I not want to understand at least the basics and where I can perhaps, get access to them? Now that's its own problem at the moment, is getting access to these things. But that's changing too. And I think this is where the power of podcasts like this, where we can just make people aware. What is a peptide? What does it do? Why should I be thinking about it? What things can it help with? On that base sort of level, so that people can understand this incredible area of and it all comes down to cellular health. I mean, I'm a student of Dr. Youth now, and I understand that it all comes back down to the cell, to the single cell. If we can break down everything back to that, getting that cell doing what it's meant to be doing, what it was intended by nature to do, before it got toxins and stress and environmental and aging and all of those things. And if we can bring it back into homeostasis, then we can live longer, healthier, better lives in end effect, if we extrapolate that then up to the organ and system level. So can you just tell me, Dr. Seeds, where would you start with this peptide conversation? What are some of the things that it can be helped with different peptide combinations and things like that? What sort of diseases are we talking about?
Sure. And I think it's important what you said, to realize that what we're doing with peptides. So what you have to respect, and which I teach all my physicians, and right at the beginning of how we're working with the cell, and trying to basically, what we're really trying to do is control the epigenetic influences on how the cell can change, right? Because a cell has a genome, and it's a particular genome that is to that person, and that function is a specified function of the cell based on the genome. But we know that not always will that genome function and produce the proteins and enzymes and things that it's supposed to, because of influences on that genome that aren't changing the genetics, but they're influencing changes in transcription and translation, which just means making new proteins and so forth, that may be different. And that's basically an epigenetic influence. And that is the key of understanding where, yeah, we're working on genetics from the epigenetic side of, because the epigenome is reversible. The genome is not. So we're doing something to influence those things that you were talking about every day that affect us. We have stress, we have radiation, we have aging, we have disease. You've got so this is where the point I'm trying to make is the cell is this incredibly intelligent, you can almost say person. It's
entity.
It has its own intelligence. You have to respect that, because really all we're doing is giving the cell its ability to correct itself. We're not doing things to change the cell in doing something. We're giving the cell its ability to right the wrongs, because the intelligence of the cell is beyond us. It's beyond me. I do not have the capacity to understand how that cell knows its job in the billion of pathways it needs to maintain the word, like, what you call homeostasis, I call redox. I call cellular redox, which is basically keeping thermonuclear dynamics of a cell within reason, and that gives the cell, the cell, like it's like the air conditioner. It's working just right. It's not too hot. Everything's moving along. So that's the focus of when I start to introduce this thought. It's look, we're giving the cell the ability to do things where we're not trying to manipulate the cell in a wrong way, which isn't bad either, but you gotta, if you're going to correct things, you've got to let the cell, you got to give the cell its ability to correct itself. And that, that's kind of where some of the genetic, like CRISPR and some things down the road are focused on, and giving the cell the ability to correct itself, and in a higher fashion, basically. But we're doing things on a level, a self-signaling level. And I think sometimes the best example, so let's start with that understanding. Let's just say we have a cell that does its job every day, and things can happen to influence how that cell changes, called epigenetic changes. And let's say that cell starts not performing well, and it becomes a problem of where it's creating signaling agents that may not be good for other cells, because it's like a burning star. It's things aren't going well. Well,
putting out chemicals, cytokines and whatever.
Cytokines, chemokines, proteases that are not healthy for other good cells. Well, when that cell is doing that, it has a program genetically to pull itself out of play. Okay. But that system doesn't go right all the time. And in fact, you can consider it like it wants to become immortal also. It doesn't want to die. It's like its own being. It's like, hey, I'd rather be bad and play than die. And so I call it going to the dark side, and it becomes
that's a good analogy.
It becomes this thing we call senescent. It's a senescent cell. And so those senescent cells are actually the key to disease, to aging, you name it. That's what we're working against with everything, with injury, disease, and cancer. And so if we understand that, and we understand that it has to do with signaling, And then if we can understand that once that senescent cell establishes itself, it becomes a very difficult cell to get rid of.
Yep.
And in fact, if you think about the body in the human and how we're always, things are always changing and reproducing, and we're always making new cells. And so you can see over time how those cells potentially can build up.
Yep.
And that's
the
aging.
body.
That's aging. And because we become less efficient in removing them, and those cells become more efficient in creating problems. And so it's a balance again. It's basically a balance. And so we have, if you understand why a cell may go that way and become senescent. So that's a big thing I teach. I spend a lot of time showing how cells make those decisions, how things can happen. But I also show how we have ways to potentially stop a cell from progressing into senescence, but also helping. So this gets a little more complicated, but it gets to where we can do things to help the immune system become better and recognize these senescent cells,
yep,
and help to remove them.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the beginning of, okay, so we know there's disease, we know there's aging, we know there's cancer, so we know there's injury. So where do you start with trying to explain this amazing story of bringing in an understanding of why the cell is so important to understand? Well, the best category to gain that knowledge for people or to get them excited is actually aging. And because we can show you definable points in a cell. For instance, let's take the brain. The brain, as we age, the brain loses its capacity to release this thing, a master hormone called growth hormone.
Yes. Yep.
Which is like the master regulator of everything.
All things. Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that starts changing at about the age of 30. And it just is a slow decline in how much you produce every 5 to 10 years of age. And by 50 years of age, you're producing almost not half of what you did at age 25, but pretty close to that number. So there's lots. So, and the amazing thing that people need to know is you haven't lost the capacity to make it, because you could be 100 years old and make just as much growth hormone as a 25-year-old. It's just the influences that affect that anterior pituitary and releasing that growth hormone. It's what's happened in your life, what's happened to what it has to do with senescence, and it has to do with what is being created to inhibit or to affect how those cells release growth hormone, because that has a great effect on a lot of efficiencies of the cell, of the mitochondria, of fat oxidation, so many metabolic processes. So it's a great way to introduce people to, well, you've heard of growth hormone, and then you teach them about IGF-1, and because that's a downstream product of growth hormone. And let me show you how we can take a peptide to help you regain that ability to release your own endogenous growth hormone. And why is that important? Because growth hormone, and this gets complicated, but it isn't, if I do this right, growth hormone doesn't mean, so when you release growth hormone from your anterior pituitary, it is released specific to what the body is demanding at that moment. Meaning growth hormone has over 100 different isoforms, meaning it's not the same growth hormone every time. It's a growth hormone that may be more focused on repair, or growth hormone more focused on metabolism, or growth hormone more focused on the mitochondria. Because again, the cell knows what to make when the body has the demand. And that's why we get into trouble when we try to make something synthetic, like synthetic growth hormone, which years ago used, it's just one type of over 100 that you make.
Wow.
So and
that can lead to cancers and things like that if you do it wrong.
Well, that's a kind of a misnomer, but it leads to, again, inefficiencies of the cell. You're thinking right, because the cell recognizes that isn't correct at that time. It's like getting a mixed message. It's like, okay, wait, that's not what I was asking for. And in fact, your brain, you pulse out growth hormone. You have the potential to pulse it out about every 3 hours. And the most important release of growth hormone is when you go to bed. And so that's why sleep is this monumental, important thing that people are just starting to recognize. And then we bring in all of these things about circadian rhythms and how there's this great influence of how the earth rotates with the sun and how that has everything to do with how you sleep and release of growth hormone. And so it becomes this wonderful story you can put together for people that makes sense, but also that can be applied to helping improve cellular metabolism on so many in so many planes at once.
Wow.
Just by giving one signal, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, think about one signal. Where else do we know if we penetrate an egg with a sperm, that's just one signal, what happens? Billions of reactions happen down the road for 9 months, billions. And the most beautiful thing comes out of it, right? This is what I'm talking about. It's
powerful, even though it's a short-lived release of a signaling molecule that is basically only there for a very short time, but the cascade over time is just massive. And it's these things like ipamorelin and sermorelin, and these are the ones that are for growth hormone release. And so that's just one, like I've got mum, she's going to be on ipamorelin.
Right.
We're working on getting that down here, so that's another conversation, but working on that. And because she's had a massive brain injury, she's prone to dementias and things like that. And so whatever I can do, so cerebrolysine, we're also getting her on so that we can help I don't know exactly what it does, but it's going to help her brain. Is it the growth hormone pathways that we're looking at with both of those, actually? Cerebrolysine, or that's a different one?
Yeah. So number one, with traumatic brain injury, strokes, and we know that they have a decreased capacity. So number one, she's older, so she's not producing growth hormone like she potentially could. Number two, brain injuries like that tend to shut down more growth hormone production. So all you're doing, so you're using something that's called a GHRP, which is a different, which does something to offset an inhibitor of releasing growth hormone in the brain. It's called somatostatin. So ipamorelin works on stopping that inhibition and giving the ability of that secretagogue, that anterior pituitary cell, to release growth hormone within about 20 minutes of that usage of that peptide. So it's a very specified use for it, typically at night when you go to bed, first thing when you wake up, and then you can use it all, there are all other ways to use it with training and so forth, but what it can be very effective in. So what it's also doing is, in the brain, growth hormones got a lot of importance in many pathways, but one of these other things, just to understand again the importance, is it has a downstream product called IGF-1 that is very important in the brain, very important in memory, very important in the blood-brain barrier, very, very important in protection, cytoprotection, controlling apoptosis, but also in influencing neuroplasticity of the brain. So yes, so from that fashion, growth hormone has some tremendous downstream effects that are effective in so many ways in
Wow.
helping people regain the ability to improve cellular metabolism in the brain, because you lose, there are a lot of issues that happen, but you lose some basic controls of how glucose is utilized in the brain, and this does some things to work on more mitochondrial efficiencies also, and some beta oxidation, and but the generality of this is it's and especially as people are getting older, it's just this incredible tool to give the brain that little spark it needs again to reestablish some control in metabolism.
Yep.
But also in neuroplasticity, and also stem cells in the brain, to get them because your mom, with her issue, developed a tremendous amount of senescence in her brain.
Yeah.
And senescence fights everything. It's interesting. Senescent cells tend to hang out close to stem cells, and you have stem cells everywhere in the body.
Suppresses stem cell production.
It suppresses the stem cell's ability to perform in repair. Like you would like to see it, and it can convert stem cells to senescent stem cells.
Oh wow.
So anyways, that's one of the things you're doing in with that, and the cerebrolysin works on many different levels in working on different growth factors to affect different activity, like improving dendritic arborization, synaptosis, synapses between neurons, growth, basically, to help axonal flow in the axon.
Wow.
And trafficking of mitochondria back and forth in the axon. So there's all kinds of things these do synergistically to help improve function.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So is it basically that one of the only things that can actually really help you regain? It's not neurogenesis, is it? It's not growing new neurons, is it?
So we believe, yes. So no, if we believe in neuroplasticity, we're all about believing in building new neural pathways, because you can. Just because something's damaged, there's no reason. And I think we've already shown that you know that age is not a discriminator. Even in older people, you can produce new neural pathways. So all we're doing is setting the stage for you to be able to do that. And there are multitudes. There are many different ways of getting to those steps, and it's really about it's timing, it's planning, and it's changing steps to keep building the momentum, and with other peptides and small molecules and supplements and so forth that are very effective. And don't forget, the gut has a big place in brain problems, and especially traumatic brain injuries, and you have to work on that at the same time. And it's all about cell signaling too, because your gut makes a lot of neurotransmitters. It's so important this is why you have to understand this communication to make sure you're doing your best to take care of the cell. And then it's actually looking at the cell membrane itself. The cell membrane, you lose certain phospholipids and plasmalogens in the cell membrane that are vital to conduction in axons and how neurons work. And so that's what we do. We work on just building things back. And
so for people with brain injuries who listen to this, or Alzheimer's or neurodegeneration of some way, shape, or form, there is hope now. There is hope with a combination. And I think this is always like a multi-pronged approach that needs to be taken, and obviously under the auspices of a very experienced physician. And this is the difficulty that, you know, we have around the world. There's not many Dr. Seeds out there and Dr. Youths out there, unfortunately not enough of you yet, to help people to put together a protocol. So if someone like me, I've had to play doctor for my own mother for the last 5.5 years, and put together a protocol based on the best that I could do for her. And we've done pretty bloody well, you know, we've done pretty damn well. But I'm only just becoming aware of the whole peptide world. And, you know, and I'm in the research, you know, so this is just so many things that don't seem to be getting to the light of day enough. And this is one of the reasons why this podcast is so important, is to share, hey, this may be something for you, for your loved one, that you need to go and explore. And then, you know, you will have your challenges finding it and getting access to it. But it's so important for things like brain injuries, because how many people have, you know, strokes and aneurysms and concussions and multiple sclerosis and all of these brain issues that could perhaps be helped with some of these, you know, with some of these peptides and a combination of other things.
No, I absolutely. And I'd even take it one step further, that my goal someday is to help people have enough knowledge to know that, well, how do I prevent myself from getting to that stage?
Yeah.
How can I be more prepared with my health, that if I do have a traumatic injury, how am I better set for that? How am I better set for what people don't realize is that, like, for instance, Alzheimer's starts in your 30s.
Yeah.
It starts very early and it goes on for 10 to 15 years before you even know anything's happening.
Yep.
So why not take advantage of how we know where we can change a cell? We can change a cell to be more protective, more efficient, and keep that cell. I always tell people, it's not about, we're not looking to live to 150 years of age, and if we can, great, but we're looking to live every day of our lives at our fullest capacity. And I'm 60, and I'm doing things that I do things better than I did in my 20s, my 30s, and my 40s, and my 50s. And I believe I'm representing this well in showing that I've just got started, and there is just so much that people deserve to know, that they can be doing, you know, that they can change their life no matter what state they're in. But boy, if we can educate people to what's available for them, and protecting them longer, and getting them to be able to take advantage of growing older, but with
function, full function,
with function, with dignity, with brilliance, I mean, I'm telling you, as I get older, I get smarter, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I understand. I wish I had this brain when I was younger, because I was stupid when I was younger.
Me too.
Right. But let me take advantage of it. Let me utilize it now. And so I'm fortunate and privileged to be able to do what I'm doing, and
and you can keep your own brain going, you know. And this is what I, you know, totally agree. Like, we seem, you know, we just get to a point in our lives, like I'm 53, and, you know, like I feel like I'm at the peak of where I've been till now, and still going up in my intellectual abilities and my maturity and my wisdom. And I'm just getting started too, you know, like, and that now is the time we're meant to be slowing down and, you know, heading off into the sunset and sitting on a beach and enjoying our retirement. I mean, I don't see you retiring anytime soon, because you've got a big mission ahead of you. You know?
That's not even in my vocabulary.
No, me neither. It's just, and you don't need to, because you know how to keep yourself well, because of all this.
So Lisa, I hate to do this to you, but I have to be on I have to do something and get,
Not a
but I
problem.
have, could we come
Can we
back?
pick this conversation up in part 2? Can we do that?
Absolutely.
That would be wonderful.
I would love to do that with you and help you. And I love your messaging. I love what you're doing. And I'm behind you 100%. And I just feel bad that I have to.
No, we had an hour set and I'd just forgotten the time because, but yes, we'll get you on for part 2 so that we can actually dive into the weeds of some of these peptides and cellular health. So thank you, Dr. William Seeds, for your time today. It's been marvelous.
Well, thank you for having me. And, but like I said, you couldn't have had a better representative than Dr. Betsy Earth. I mean,
She's
there you go. Right.
I know, she is wonderful. And we will get you back on for part 2, Dr. Seeds. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, nice to